And welcome to Piping Live and to the National Piping Centre here in Glasgow. We're here this afternoon celebrating the life and work and music of Donald MacLeod, one of the legends, of course, of piping here in Scotland and throughout the world for that matter. A very warm welcome to those of you here in the Piping Centre, and also to those of you at home or at the end of a computer, wherever you may be, logging in and watching this live webcast. So I know we have people logging in from all the airs, from all parts of the world, so a very warm welcome to you as well. For this first session, for this first hour, I'm joined by some very special guests here, and we're really going to have a chat about Donald and his music. I'd like to offer a very warm welcome, first of all, to a lady whose name is very famous throughout the world, or her maiden name certainly, after the tune that was named for her from her dad. Please give a very warm welcome to Susan MacLeod. And joining Susan, she's not on stage, but another famous lady, Fiona MacLeod, is also with us. Give Fiona a round. And then two expert pipers. Donald, of course, one of the things he did a great deal of was inspire others through his teaching, both here in Scotland and, of course, overseas. And we have one representative from the home pupils, if you like, and one from that overseas diaspora, part of Donald's piping influence. Please welcome John Wilson from Scotland. And from Canada, Iain MacDonald. Okay, so Donald MacLeod, as I said, he's so many things to so many people. In terms of family, however, let's just start with his background. Born in Stornoway and into a piping family. His father was certainly, your granddad was a piper.
Was a piper, yes.
Yes. Of a Lewis family, long-standing Lewis family?
Dad's dad was from Stornoway, but his mum was a MacDonald from Skye.
And Gaelic-speaking family going back?
Gaelic-speaking family. His granny, who lived at Beneside, which is one of the tunes Dad composed, she had no English, so it had to be Gaelic. And it was her putting the cockerel under the creel on a Saturday night, which made Dad compose that tune.
I think we're going to get references to lots of tunes as we go, and it's one of the lovely things is being able to get some of the background to that. There's number one, Cockerel in the Creel, very famous tune, of course. We'll come back to the tunes maybe in a short while, but your own early memories, I would imagine there was piping in your ears from morning, noon till night.
Yes, we were born into it, and we thought nothing of it. It wasn't until we lost Dad that there was this gaping hole in our lives, both musically, and he was a very loving father, so on both counts there was a gaping hole in our lives.
Practice chanter going all the time? There was one story I heard about learning his tunes when he was pushing you in the pram. Is that? Well, you won't remember that, obviously.
I don't remember it, but I've been told it very, very, very often. Dad used to walk me in the pram for miles, and he would endeavour to put a Pibroch book on the bottom of the pram to learn a tune. But until I was asleep, it was impossible because the book apparently was tossed out. So he had to walk till I was asleep, and then he could go through his tune as he walked along.
That's dedication, dedication to something or other, to tunes as well as family.
Yes, indeed.
And of course, as well as your grandfather, his father being an early influence, there's other great names from the Lewis area. John Morrison.
John Morrison, Ascent House, was a huge influence. He really was Dad's mentor. It was him who took Dad to his first Northern meeting, but was a little afraid that he wasn't going to get him off the platform at Inverness Station because naturally Dad had never seen a train before,
Of course,
and he
yes.
was fascinated.
I'm trying to think if he wrote any train tunes, but I can't.
Not
Train
that
Journey
I-
North wasn't his, of course. It was Tom Anderson.
No, not that I can think of.
So John Morrison, who was John Morrison? Again, he's one of these names because of the reel that everyone will know, everyone in piping, but he was a local Lewis
He was a local
supporter.
Lewisman and a businessman who took a great interest in piping and in the young pipers in Stornoway, perhaps even further afield in the town. I really am not sure of that.
And we'll come back to you, Susan, we'll give you a rest, and we'll come back to some of the family stuff a little bit later. But John, you were a long-standing pupil of his. You'd have been quite young when you first went under his gaze, his ears.
Yeah, you're right, Gary. I was just relating to Susan. It's quite funny. I mean, I started competing when I was 8, and my father taught me from about 6. And I had been getting prizes from that age group 8 to sort of 10. I was probably about 10 when I went to Donald. But I always remember my father had clearly written to Donald at Fort George to ask him if he would take me on for Pembroke. And I remember when he came to me, he obviously didn't want to mention it until he got confirmation. He came to me and he said I was going to be getting tuition in Pembroke from Donald MacLeod. And my first reaction was, who's Donald MacLeod? I really was. As a kid, I was quite reticent about the whole thing because, you know, my dad was my pal. He was excellent at setting pipes up. He was a very good player. And as a kid, I thought, you know, what has this Donald MacLeod got that my father doesn't have? And why would my father want to ship me off to somebody when we're doing a pretty good job as a team at the moment? So from that generated this system whereby Donald, we sent a reel-to-reel tape to Donald of me playing, and by return he sent this tape, and I always remember that sort of very warm, gentle articulation that he had, very friendly voice coming on, and he said that I was a good player and that he would give me some tunes. And what he wanted to do was to develop my sense of self-expression. And on that first reel-to-reel, he put Hila Carius, Glengarry's March, and the Lament for Patrick Og McCrimmon. And I was given, it was long instruction on it, and I started to get to grips with his teaching style. And that was the system for years. I had to send the tape back to Donald, or another reel-to-reel back to Donald with me playing, and then he would send a reel-to-reel back to us with a critique on what he had heard, and then he would put another 2 tunes on. So in actual fact, it was about almost 2 years before I actually met Donald MacLeod. I mean, he could have been 8 foot tall for all I knew. I had no idea what, because as a kid, you're not really up to speed on the big names in piping. You're very much in your own sort of junior piping world, and you play at your competition and you then do what your father tells you. So I didn't really know what Donald looked like. So it was some 2 years before I met him at the Euston Barra one day when my father had taken me along there, and he was in the company of Archie McNabb. And my father said, "This is the voice on the tape." And I saw this wee dapper man standing there, and I thought, oh, I don't think that's what I expected. But it all fitted. As soon as he spoke, it just all fitted.
We think of that style of teaching as a very modern thing, I suppose, you know, by the internet and Skype and so on, but it was obviously the way it was happening back then.
Oh, it was happening back then, and it was actually very effective, but I have to say that was probably more down to Donald's style of teaching. I think it would have been very hard for anyone not to take something out of a lesson from Donald MacLeod. Such was the delivery of his lesson, and he just a wonderful way of explaining things and assessing how well you were doing with his teaching as he was going along.
Iain, were there tapes flying back and forward across the Atlantic as well?
Eventually there were, but I first met him at a summer school.